Welcome to the Shunned podcast. It's a new year, 2020, a whole new decade, and I'm going to keep exposing religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Being at the beginning of a new year and a new decade, I kind of see big things in the future. More and more people are speaking out against these different cults or religious organizations, and I think there's really a lot of momentum building in the ex-Jehovah's Witness movement. I wanted to get this year and this new decade off to a great start. So one of the things that I've done is I've released a new website called xjwhelp.com. So again, that's xjwhelp.com. I've made videos to help answer some of the common questions that I get asked, some of the issues that I see come up that people are struggling with, and I'm going to continue to add to this library of videos there. There's a free downloadable roadmap to help you see where you are in your journey. There's resources where you can find local meetups, online meetups through the Shunned Recovery Project, other projects and books that might be of help, and even a live chat service or individual coaching if that's what you're looking for. I will continue to add to the site regularly. So to celebrate the release of xjwhelp.com, to celebrate the new year, the new decade, I'm releasing 10 episodes this month instead of 2. So, I just really wanted to do something to kind of blow it out. My initial goal was to do an episode a day for the whole month of January. That was a ridiculous goal that I could not meet, and that's okay too. But I've got 10 episodes ready to go, and I'm going to start releasing one a day, Monday through Friday for the next 2 weeks. So, I really wanted to kind of do something to show, there's so many people who are reaching out to me. It's really hard to keep up. There are so many of us out here that want to tell our stories, and that's an amazing thing. So in order to streamline this process of releasing so many, I'm not going to tell you who you're about to meet. You can read the description if you're interested in that. That way I can add this to the front of each episode without having to spend time recording each individually. So let's dive right into the interview and get to meet today's guest.
My name is Nina. I am 45 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Nina. So how'd you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I was born in fourth generation on my father's side, third generation on my mother's side.
Gotcha.
My mom came in, I think she was 10 years old when her parents became Jehovah's Witnesses. The rest of, my mom's dad was just an outlaw, like serious outlaw. All kinds of insurance fraud, drug running, all kinds of stuff. On my grandmother's side, she was Baptist, and I don't know how they became Jehovah's Witnesses, but they did. My mom was 10. She's the middle child of 5, 3 sisters and a brother. And then on my dad's side, he was an infant, but he had his mom would take him to the bars and give him whiskey and beer in his bottles to make him fall asleep and pick up men. And then his dad used to beat her. And so, they both come from pretty rough backgrounds. Yeah. And I think that had a lot to do with, being easily manipulated within that Jehovah's Witness culture.
Oh, yeah. Vulnerability.
They prey on vulnerable people. Yep. So...
Yeah, for sure.
But I was born in 1974, mm-hmm. So right before 1975.
Oh, wow.
Heard a lot about it, growing up. I believe France was actually one of the governing body when I was younger in the organization. Because I remember it being kind of a big uproar when he left and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that would have been Ray Franz, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Fred was obviously the president at one point. I don't know exactly when, but yeah. So I know that was a big deal. So obviously your family has some strong or some roots in this.
Yes.
What was the worldview that it gave you growing up in it?
So my early discipline, lots and lots of discipline. In the 70s and 80s, spare the rod, spoil the child was heavily indoctrinated into parents. And my parents, used to love to brag that we were so well behaved because, they beat us all the time. Yeah. But my earliest memories are actually being a Jehovah's Witness. I had a magazine route when I was between 4 and 6 years old. I remember being up on the stage talking about said magazine route between those ages. Everyone adored me. I was allowed to I was not allowed to draw. I was never allowed to sleep. I had to be looking at the platform at all times. My mom carried a wooden spoon in her book bag. And like if I started like fidgeting or looking around or trying to ask questions, she would just pull that spoon out, so I could see it to let me know, like, that's your warning.
Yeah.
I remember one time I sat with a couple of younger girls. They're probably in their teens. And I drew pictures. I was so excited they let me draw. And I showed my mom and dad afterwards, and I was so excited. And they gave me a pretty hefty speech about it afterwards. And I mean, I was kindergarten.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
That's funny. It's funny that you bring that up because I just went to a basketball game last night with a friend who has a daughter who's 3.5, I think about 4. And, we were at an event, and after I left it, I was like, the game's about 2 hours, and I was just sitting there thinking, like, how did we sit for 2 hours and not make a peep? Like,
yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and I would see all the other kids around me, kids older than me. They'd be on the floor sleeping. I mean, we had our meetings at 7:30 at night on a weekday, and we had school the next day. And my mom, like, we got there 30 to 45 minutes early, and we closed that place down. Like, we were we would be sitting in the car, my dad and my siblings and my mom would still just be like in there, just blah 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 blah. So it was rough. I think discipline and fear probably was a big role because I've heard people discuss this on many occasions, but one of the earliest pictures I remember is not of like the paradise, but of the ground opening, fire coming from the sky, a little girl running with her teddy bear, people falling into the cracks, and just terrified, and this was going to happen in my lifetime. I was my sister was born in 76, and then my brother was not born until the 86 or 89. It was about 86, I think. So we're kind of spread apart. I was born in California in Palm Springs, but we moved to Yuma shortly after that, and that's where we moved a lot. My mom was the type that believed that the man's the head of the house, the woman stays home and pioneers and takes care of the kids and the house. And I mean, my dad struggled. He was a very smart man, but raising a family that big, even back then, was hard. And my mom didn't help out at all. So I just remember. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You're just talking about your dad struggling to keep up with everything.
So we moved a lot. And one of the other things that was really weird about my family is we tended to move where my mom's family moved. So it's like someone in the family would say, hey, there's a great job opportunity out here. So we moved to Yuma. My sister was born. And then we moved to Odessa, Texas, shortly after that. My mom's family wasn't living there. They were back in California. I don't know why we ended up in Odessa, but that's when I started kindergarten. That's when some of my really first memories started forming, was then.
Is that just because of school or?
I think so. Gotcha. I mean, just like bits and pieces of my earliest memories probably go back. I mean, to when I was like 2-3 years old, but they're just like little short memories.
Sure.
My mom was very depressed. She would put aluminum foil on the windows. I can remember many occasions sitting at the foot of her bed in the afternoon or early morning, coloring or drawing and just being like, please wake up, because she slept. Like, she would sleep all day and then be up all night long. She said it was because my dad snored, but Another thing that happened early on in my life is my mom complained about my dad all the time. And then when I
Oh, I've
became
been there.
yeah. And then
Oh
when I
my.
became a teenager, my dad started it on me. So I was getting manipulated and like brainwashed by both of them as well as the religion
Yeah.
at such an early age that like to know me now, I used to be a nervous wreck. Like I could not, like my hands, I would be biting my nails all the time. I'd be fidgeting because I always felt guilty. Like when I was with my mom, I felt guilty because we were talking about my dad. And when I was with my dad, I felt guilty because I was,
Yeah,
talking
that's
about my mom. And they would
tremendous
just tell
pressure.
me such inappropriate things like about their sex life and stuff.
Yeah.
Like my mom saying my dad needed it all the time and he had a masturbation problem, and my dad saying my mom never wanted it. And, just put so much.
You
And
know there's a
then
term for that?
mental molestation.
Yeah, or covert incest,
Yeah,
basically. Yeah, yeah. It's a very it's honestly probably a much more common thing than people really think, and
right,
it's just wildly inappropriate to
right.
have those to put your children in those kind of places where they're almost like a surrogate spouse in some way. That's just it's so unfair.
Oh, yeah, it really is. And I protected my brother and sister a lot from a lot. Like when we would all three be in trouble, my mom, when she spanked us, it was not that bad. I can't even really remember spankings from her. But my dad, like, he would spank out of anger. He'd be frustrated. He'd get home. We were in trouble. He had to deal with it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want excuses. It was just get out, whatever. I think his hand hurt worse than anything, but he spanked us with pretty much anything. Um, but I would go first because I knew like he would get wore down by the time he got to my brother. And my sister wouldn't cry. And my dad hated that. So like he would just beat her and beat her and beat her. And I would be like, would you just like fake cry or something? But she had so much like stubborn hostility in her, this
Yeah,
pride.
probably a lot of rage too.
Oh yeah. Oh, talk about rage.
Phew.
We all three suffer from it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, it's really weird because living in it, I thought I had the worst childhood in the world. But then, like, coming from it and then hearing other people's childhoods, it's like, it wasn't always that bad. It was just when it was bad, it was bad.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like the
absolutely.
constant moving. I mean, even when we'd be in a town, it was like when the rent was due, we had to move practically. We would get our utilities shut off. We hardly ever had a phone. If my mom actually got a car, it would probably get repossessed or broken down and it wouldn't be replaced, so she was stuck at home a lot. She's also a compulsive liar. So that's another thing that, early on when I started realizing that she wasn't telling the truth, instead of talking to her about it, it was really weird because we would be at the Kingdom Hall and she'd be telling these outrageous stories. And her friends would kind of look at me like, really, did that happen? And she would see them looking at me and she'd say, right, Nina, right? Didn't that happen? And I mean, what do? You're a kid. That's your mom. Like, you're going to throw her under the bus.
Yeah. You have to agree. That's an unfair position as well.
Yeah, it's just a lot. And her lies, again, recently got me in trouble or got me involved in the Jehovah's Witness thing a couple of years ago. So,
Yeah, yeah, we'll get to
um,
that.
yeah.
So what was childhood? So I mean, you've talked a little bit about what childhood was like at home, um, from the kind of the more personal standpoint. What about as little Jehovah's Witnesses? Were your parents the type? Obviously, they were disciplinarians and inappropriate in many ways, but were they the type who outwardly appeared at least like they were handling things quote spiritually at home?
Oh, yes. Um, Definite double life. But it was so weird because it was like we still didn't do like my mom never watched a rated R movie. My mom's never cussed. I always joke that that's going to be on her headstone. Never said a bad word or watched an R-rated movie. Like that's her mantra. Like she feels like she's the best Jehovah's Witness because of those two facts. It's
Yeah.
so weird. But it'd be weird things like we could watch Wonder Woman and then all of a sudden we couldn't watch Wonder Woman. We could watch Wizard of Oz and then all of a sudden, but like parents would
Yes.
compare their kids to me all the time, to me and my sister and later on my brother all the time. We were always so well behaved. Why can't you be like the light girls? Why can't you just sit still? Why can't you pay attention? When we got older, we could do the tally marks like Jehovah, Jesus, whenever they would say one or the other, you could put a tally mark. That's the only time, or we could take notes.
Right.
But we were always out in field service. But the weird thing is my mom, she would auxiliary pioneer. She would, but then the older I got, the more like reclusive and depressed she got. So like we would have book study and we'd have field service in our home, field service, before field service. And during the summertime, like during school, she'd just put notes on the door. Sorry, come on in. I'm not feeling well. Just have the meeting and go. Or I know we made plans, but I can't do this. And then when me and my sister were older and in the summertime, we would be the ones that have to like repeat this message. Like she would make plans all the time and then cancel at the last minute because she just, she was also addicted to painkillers, and she would send us to brothers and sisters' homes to ask for like Vicodin or, do you have any extra of this or extra that? It was just such a weird childhood. I mean,
that's something that that isn't talked about a whole lot, but there's a lot of prescription drug abuse.
Oh yeah.
Inside the organization.
Everyone's mentally ill or depressed. I mean, how do you live up to that? I mean, when that finally hit me that there is absolutely nothing I can do to please Jehovah other than be Jesus Christ, like, what? And then they say, not by works, but by this, not by work, but then it's always works.
Yeah.
It's such a hard life.
I also wanted to touch on something else that you said, because you brought up something that I think you're the first person I've heard say this. And I saw it in my house. I know my wife has talked about it, and I had friends I saw do it to their kids. And that was this like wishy-washy nature of like, Wonder Woman is okay to watch. Nope, Wonder Woman is off limits. It seemed like parents were often allowing something, and then I don't know if there'd be a talk at a meeting or what that would trigger their conscience, and then all of a sudden, nope, that's gone.
Yeah.
And it's a really, they talk about that scripture that's like, do not exasperate your children. I mean, that is exasperating.
Oh my goodness.
To never have any firm foundation.
Scripture.
Yeah.
My mom used to throw that scripture in my dad's face all the time, and it's like, you're just as exasperating. So what are you talking about?
Yes. That is a tough place to be.
It really is. So the longest we finally settled back where I was born, which was in the desert in California. I grew up in like Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree area, which is pretty close to Palm Springs. I don't know if you're familiar with California at all, but
not much.
Kind of close to LA.
Gotcha.
Suburbs of that, but it's in the desert. And like I said, me and my mom's family, we would all live kind of in this like 3-block radius of each other. My grandma and my older aunt lived together. My older aunt never married or anything. And then, then she would have her other sister, and I had two girl cousins, and then her youngest sister and 2 boy cousins, and then her brother, and he had 2 girls. And so we all grew up together. We always did everything together. We'd go to the drive-in movies and have tacos and tailgate and family dinners, once, twice a month, if not more. And just everything we did together. And, but it was really weird because they would disown my mom at times too.
Oh, really?
Because she would just, she would lie. And then my dad ended up embezzling at a company that both my aunt and my uncle worked at. Just a rough childhood. Sorry, I keep on saying that.
It's very true. I mean, it is.
Especially when you have 2 parents that just.
Yeah.
When I got out, I remember thinking, like, what educated person would believe this? Like, I can see being born into it, or starting it at such a young age as my parents were. But like, if you're an intelligent person and you went to college and you've seen the world, how do you get sucked into this? I don't understand. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, it's not about intelligence. It's about a lot of other things. There's actually a really great video on how people get sucked in. Just the emotions and how they get you to take one step, and then they've got you kind of hooked. It's really interesting.
It's true. Well, I mean, I remember having questions, like, if Jehovah's perfect and he knew everything, then why did he even make Adam and Eve if he knew they were going to mess up?
Right.
And my mom would say things like, don't question Jehovah. Jehovah has a reason for everything. That's why he gave us free will, because he loves us. But free will always came with a consequence. Like, you didn't really have free will.
Yeah. Yep. And then you could
Or
go
they
into
would,
scriptures about hardening hearts and stuff like that.
right.
Yeah.
Or they would like say it's a conscience matter. Like, I remember when the new blood cards came out and you could use all those other things besides blood. And they had to talk about it and went over all the procedures. And they were like, but keep in mind, this is a conscious matter. This is still blood product. Blah, blah. And I remember my dad and my best friend and my husband at the time and a couple of other people, being at my parents' house and going over everything. And we all said no to everything because we were just like, I don't want to take that chance.
Yeah.
Or if I, even take plasma, I could die because I, took a byproduct of blood. So,
Yep. Yeah. It's
and everyone's judging you on that too. I remember everyone talking about, if they decided to and if they didn't. And the people who decided to, the people who decided not to were like judging them. And
Yep. Yep. It's, any excuse to judge someone.
Oh, that's another thing I learned in that culture is just being super judgmental, but never being hard on I could always salve my conscience in some way.
Oh, really?
I was a very rebellious child. I was a very angry child.
Oh, I bet.
My mom, when my brother came along, I practically raised him. I was 10 years old when my brother was born, and he would come to me in the middle of the night. The only thing she really did was nurse him, but I'm the one that would get up to take care of him stuff. It wasn't me, it was my dad. I can remember being sick as a child. My dad would be the one to come in and take care of everything, never my mom. And my dad's the one that's working 2 and 3 jobs to try to keep us afloat. But,
Yeah.
mom's sleeping. So, but,
Well, let me ask you, did you find any relief at school? Did you find any friends anywhere or?
Okay, I grew up in congregations where there were lots of kids. I had lots of friends. My family was very well liked despite the weirdness of my mom because they were very charming. My parents are very charming and very social. We would have people over at our house all the time playing card games, watching movies. I would have ginormous slumber parties where there were 20, 30 kids, and my mom would put out this huge spread, and people loved being at our house.
Wow.
There were always gatherings. There was always stuff to do with your Jehovah's Witness friends. However, in school, it was really weird because it was still so cliquey. It was like we'd be friends at school, but then sometimes we wouldn't be friends in school because, we weren't very wealthy, so we didn't get to dress nice. And, you're in California, clothes mattered. If you shopped at Kmart or Goodwill, it was, teachers would make fun of you. I mean, it was
I got made fun of all the time for my DAV clothes.
Yeah. And I mean, just, I got picked on a lot by worldly kids. I don't know why to this day. Even teachers would pick on me. So I didn't get much relief from school, and I didn't care about school. I was happy with D's because I figured, I'm not even going to get to high school, so who cares? None of this is important. I'm going to end up getting married to an elder and pioneer, and just try to save as many people as possible. And so,
but it sounds
I don't know.
So you didn't fit in at school, but it sounds like you really, at the Kingdom Hall, you all were crushing. Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
It was like a love hate, because the kids would like us and we, it'd be fun and everything, but then their parents would come down on them to start acting like this. And my friends knew Nina's not really like that. I was an instigator. I was the one that came up with all the bad ideas. I was the troublemaker because my mom tried to make us so perfect that I was just like, no, we're going to go toilet paper that house.
Oh, wow. Did you at least take some tracks with you or something so you can count your time?
Right? That was another big thing, especially when I became a teenager, is, you'd go out with a big group of of kids your age, and we would always get the rural territory because, you wouldn't go to the no trespassing, which all rural territory mainly had no trespassing. And, you maybe get one or two houses for like 3 hours
Yeah.
because you're just like way out in the country. And that's what we would do. I mean, we just like goof off and play around. And I remember me and my cousin one time pioneered together, and I knew like he did not get in time. But I saw him put in like 60 or 80 hours. I can't remember. And I was like, Christopher, you didn't even get that much time. And he's like, I'm lying. Like, who cares? Like, what are they going to know? It's like, oh,
Yeah, there was
I can't
apparently a
remember.
lot more of that than I thought. I was never one to
Yeah.
cheat on that super
know.
shame based, so I could never do that. But I've talked to a lot of ex witnesses that cheated on their time.
Yeah. Well, my mom was a big, like, she would go leave magazines in a phone booth and count an hour. Like, she, she,
It was a
she
big
would,
phone
like,
booth.
yeah, it was a big phone booth. It was a long line to put that magazine in there. But yeah, just the contradiction, very, very ingrained. Do not have children. Do not have children. So then when I started getting older and I saw these girls, getting pregnant and stuff, I was like, how could you do that? Like, why would you want to bring a child into this system of things? And
That is a
life is
weird
hard
thing that you
enough.
see. Yeah.
Um, I came, the Young People Ask book came out when I was a teenager. Um, I think I loved theater. I loved acting and stuff like that. I
Hmm.
was really good at public speaking. I really paid attention to like gesturing, pausing, reading really well. And so when I would give parts at the Kingdom Hall, it was always like a big production. It wasn't just like two sisters sitting there, preaching to each other. It'd be like, you know, outfits and props and everything.
Oh, you were that person. All right.
Yes, I was that person. And so that was kind of I guess an escape too,
Yeah.
is being able to do that. Um I used to hate going out in service. It was the worst anxiety because you're always so afraid you're going to knock on someone's door that you go to school with, and they're going to make fun of you because you already tried preaching to them at school and they think you're weird. And now you're knocking on their door. And, and you would be in the neighborhoods where you would knock on the first door, and by the third door, you realized all the neighbors have already called each other and warned them that the Jehovah's Witnesses are there because you see the curtains opening a little bit and them peeking out. I'm like, go away.
Oh, and imagine that was before, like, now there's Facebook groups and stuff for neighborhoods where people can
So
post and
weird.
everybody
Yeah.
knows.
Oh, they do it in my neighborhood all the time.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
So yeah, it just it was, and summertime we always had to pioneer. Anytime we like, if it was Christmas time, December, we had to pioneer. Spring break we had to pioneer. Heck, when I was disfellowshipped, I had to go out in service. So
Oh, wow.
oh yeah,
What?
oh yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. We'll get to that. That's insane. We will get to that. All right. I've not heard of that. So, all right. So you're a kid. It sounds like, you're pretty involved in things, at least from the appearance standpoint.
Yes.
Enjoyed giving talks and stuff. Did you truly believe, or did you just go along with?
I believed.
Yeah.
I thought it was hard. I thought it was very, it kept on talking about how easy it is, how easy Jehovah makes it on us. My mom's favorite phrase is like, Jehovah's given us new light and he's making it easier on us, because she used to talk about how like the conventions were 7 to 9 days, and the women and the children would be in these food tents cooking food for like the whole, stadium of people. Like we go to Dodger Stadium and stuff like that for assemblies. When I was a kid, it was 4 or 5 day assemblies for the district conventions, and then like 3 days for the circuit assemblies.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when they still served food before you had to buy it and then start bringing your own.
Yep.
There was like, we had a circuit assembly hall, and there was a big cafeteria, and I used to dream about the day I could serve. I could pour the tea and the coffee, because like the youngsters would go around and do that. At the tables, refresh the tea and coffee and water and stuff. and it was delicious food. And then they went to the gross, bagels and cream cheese thing and the weird sandwiches. And then, on top of the expense of traveling, now you have to figure out how to bring food into the
Hey,
equation.
hey, hey. That's all that's all that I ever knew. I know, I'd never had anything pre the what you're calling disgusting sandwiches. But those disgusting sandwiches were better than what we brought from home. So
Oh gosh.
I missed them when they left.
You missed them when they left? Well,
I missed the
my
roast
mom was
beef
an
and stuff.
excellent cook, and so
Uh,
were her sisters. So,
we
I
didn't
mean,
have that.
we would all, my aunt can make a mean meatloaf sandwich. So, so,
Oh, that
so
sounds
we were
delicious right
we
now.
were well fed. Yeah. But so anyways, like I said, I was a very rebellious child. Started doing really bad things. Another thing that my dad was an alcoholic for a while, but never like out of control. Just, drank very heavily. But at a very early age, we were introduced to alcohol. I can remember being in restaurants and my parents letting us take a couple of drinks of their wine. Now, when we moved to Texas, I was 16, and we would go out to dinner. And in Texas, if you were with your parents or you were with your husband and he was 21 and you had your marriage license, they would serve you alcohol. So
Okay.
so we would go out to eat and we would get alcohol. When I would have friends come spend the night, my mom would buy us wine coolers. She would just make those kids call their parents and be like, "Hey, is it okay if they have a couple of wine coolers?" And most of the time the parents were okay with it. It was very weird.
That is weird. So
Yeah, so
so let me ask you, you said that you believed it. When did you get baptized in all of this?
13.
13. And did you do that of your own, purely of your own volition? Did you feel peer
Well,
pressure? Were you?
all my friends were getting
Yeah.
baptized, and I was like, I need to make the truth my own and take this stand. And my little sister, who was only 10 at the time, got baptized the same time I did. And my parents were totally against it, but the elders were like, oh no, she's ready.
Oh
And
wow.
I didn't even study for like the baptism questions. I was really good at a very early age. I could read a paragraph and then the question, and I could summarize because the answer's right in the paragraph.
Oh yeah.
And
Word
I
for
could
word.
summarize, but put it so eloquently in my words that it impressed people. Like I seemed very well educated in their terminology and everything. And I could just make it sound so beautiful and like it came from my heart. I mean, I knew how to play people. My mom, it was in the genes.
Yeah,
Um,
you had to play people in order to play all the roles that you had to play
exactly.
to keep everybody happy.
Exactly. When I got baptized, I was sinning bad. I, I was going to girlfriends' houses who were witnesses, but like their parents, they had a single mom who worked at night or slept really heavy, or and we would have parties with worldly kids and alcohol. We'd take cars in the middle of the night and drive around town. We'd go into town and ask people to buy us alcohol. I mean, lived a very double life,
Wow.
very very double life.
At a very young age.
At a very young age. At a very young age. Like I said, I had a lot of anger, hostility. I would be so tired from being up with my brother and then come home from school. And my mom would just start in it. She was the lecturing type.
Yeah.
If you rolled your eyes or huffed, you would get literally a 2-hour lecture. And she would say, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And I would, tell her that's not the point. And it was just like mind numbing. And I would get so angry, I would take it out on my sister.
Mm.
And I would just be so mean to her. I would kind of like sometimes hit her or push her, or like pinch her. And one day, my sister, who is bigger than me, I had her down, holding her down by her neck. And she looked up at me, and I knew by the look, I was like, and she like hit me like square in the jaw. And that was the last time I ever touched my sister. I started hurting myself after that. Um,
Wow,
Before I
it's
even,
just amazing how that it all rolls downhill,
it really
It
does. It
really
really, really
it does.
does.
And then you end up taking it out on your sister. Now you can't, so now you're going to take it out on yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
I was very suicidal. My sister would hide pills all the time. Um, just I was just so confused. Everything was so conflicting. Like, I can remember, them talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and I'm like, but this is what we look. We look like those whitewashed graves. We're
Yep.
all so stinking dirty. Like, elder rated R movie, elder cusses, elder alcoholic. I mean, everyone has these hidden lives because no one can live up to that.
Yeah.
No one can live up to that expectation that the Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to live up to. And then, so I got disfellowshipped, I believe, when I was 14 or 15.
Really? That's young.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was so stupid. You're never going to believe this, and you're never going to believe what they did, the elders. It is so crazy. My parents were going out of town, not very far, probably about maybe an hour away, to stay at a hotel for their anniversary. And I opened my big mouth at school and said, hey, my parents out of town, party at my house. And before I knew it, like, people from 2 cities over were coming to my house. Like, it was just like one of those movies where, you say something stupid and the next thing you know, everyone's like, adults were coming to this party. And my cousins were just like, yeah, this is going to be so much fun. And my sister was supposed to be staying with a neighbor so that I could just have some friends over and hang out. And she knew we were going to have a party. And she told me, she's like, if you don't let me stay at the party, I'm going to tell mom and dad.
It's like a sitcom.
Yes. So I was like, fine. And my aunt dropped my 2 cousins off. And I told her, I just blurted it out because I was so scared by this time because, people are bringing alcohol, pot, cigarette, like people didn't even know who I was. They were just coming to my house for a party.
Yeah, it's an open house.
And I told my aunt, and I was like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm throwing a big party and a bunch of worldly kids are coming over and there's probably going to be alcohol. And you know what she told me? She says, just don't get caught by the cops. And she's a Jehovah's Witness. And I was just like, okay. And then, when she left, my cousins were like, why would you tell her? And I was like, I'm scared. They're like, it's going to be fine. So all these people start showing up, right? The later it gets, the more people are coming in. And my sister so our bedroom was a 3-car garage that got transformed into a living area.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my sister shared this. And a bunch of people were in that bedroom, like making out, dancing, all that stuff. And my sister, who is like 10 or 11 at this time, was dancing with this guy. And he grabbed her butt or her boob, I can't remember what it was, and she said something to me, and an older guy overheard it, and he started fighting with that guy, and he almost threw him through our big window in the living room. It was so scary, and it was just so out of hand. I mean, the house was wrecked. There's cigarette butts everywhere. People are like lighting joints on the stove, and it's just chaotic. And there was a Jehovah's Witness. I know there was a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses at this party. There was a Jehovah's Witness who found out about it, and she called the elders. And my phone rang. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and I answer, and my dad's like, "Are you having a party?" And I was like, "No, no." And my heart's like pounding out of my chest, and I was like, "No, no." And he's like, "I'm on my way home." He's like, "There better not be a party." And so I tell my cousin, I'm like, my dad's on his way over here. What are we going to do? And so she yells, "Cops!" And everyone just leaves. And, but the house is still like, we had these clear garbage bags. And like, I literally pulled it out of the trash can in front of my dad. And it's full of like Budweiser and all that you can see it. But he was so busy looking for people hiding in the house that he didn't even see like the cigarette smoke. Like, his eyes were blinded to everything, because he was just so busy looking for people hiding in the house.
Wow.
And
or who knows what, if he was a little tipsy, or who knows what might have been the case at the time.
So he left, and he's like, he's like, why is all the furniture out of the living room? I was like, we were surprising you for your anniversary, and we took everything out so we could deep clean the house. And he's like, oh, okay, well, that's nice,
Even in lies, Jehovah's Witnesses are cleaning something.
Exactly. So weeks went by, And, nothing happened from it. But the elders knew, like they knew, because that girl who turned me in was like, oh, there was definitely a party. They're totally lying about it. And so a few weeks later, we were having a barbecue at my house, and I get a call from my friend. And she's like, Nina, you've got to tell the truth about the party, because we're getting like, the elders are asking us questions and we just can't lie anymore. And I was like, no, you can't say anything. And then she's like, my mom's like, what's going on? And I was like, nothing, nothing. And then I get off the phone and I was like, they're trying to tell me to say that I had a party because they don't want to get in trouble for something that they did. And she's like, what? Well, come to find out, the elders were on the line with my friend as they were talking to me. So like they did this undercover cop thing to catch me in a lie. Yeah. I'm just
Wow.
a kid.
She was wearing a wire.
Shouldn't your parents take care of something like that? Like, why do the elders need to get involved in anything like that? It was so asinine. So,
but elders love punishing some people.
They love drama. Oh, they love
not all of them, obviously, but some really get off on that.
So one of my parents' best friends, great family friend, was one of the elders on my case. We never even went to the Kingdom Hall for judicial meetings. They all came to my house.
Wow.
They ended up publicly reproving my sister and disfellowshipping me because I lied about my cousins being at my party, because my aunt's like, you can't say that they were there. And I'm like, okay, no, they were not there. And then all of a sudden she's like, okay, you got to say they were there. And so they said that I wasn't repentant because I lied about that. So that's why I literally got disfellowshipped. Not because of the party, not because of the drugs and alcohol, because I lied about my cousins being there.
And meanwhile, your parents are involved in a whole lot of things and they seem to be fine.
Yeah. And not only that, but my sister's a baby and she's getting publicly reproved. Like,
10, 11.
Yeah. Wow. Super crazy. So I wrote a letter like 2 weeks after my disfellowshipment trying to get back in. Because do you know what it's like to be a teenager and you can't hang out with worldly kids at school and all your witness friends are shunning you? So
how were you treated at home?
My parents were very loving. Actually, when the elders left and everything had come out, they just grabbed me and hugged me and, said, we'll get through this. And it was really weird. I didn't get spanked. Wow. I got grounded and, and they told me that, once I got reinstated, I probably wouldn't be allowed to associate with any of those people. And I was like, Mom, it was all my idea. Like, don't blame them. They were just along for the ride. But another thing that happened, I think this was either before I was disfellowshipped or while I was disfellowshipped. I was on the school newspaper. I was a freshman. And the principal had come out with this rule about showing excessive displays of affection. Mm-hmm. You're a teenager, you're dumb. It's like, this is so stupid. I interviewed the principal and asked him hard-hitting questions like, what exactly is public display? And if you don't like it, don't look. I interviewed all kinds of students on the policy. I even had a couple of Jehovah's Witness kids like make really smart-ass remarks. And we were having dinner one night and 2 elders show up at our door with the newspaper. I was the first freshman ever in that school to get a front page story. Mm-hmm. I was so proud of myself. I won an award and all this stuff. And they came to talk to me about how, like, I wasn't being a good witness because I was encouraging expression. So I'm just being a journalist. Like, what do you mean? And I felt so bad because one of the elders, I was in class with one of his sons, and his son just happened to have the newspaper lying out, and he saw it. And so then they were like, "Oh, gotta go have a committee meeting." So it was just weird. So we ended up, I kind of burned some bridges in that Kingdom Hall and everything. My mom kind of burned some bridges, and we were going to move to Texas. California was just getting too expensive. And before that summer, one of my mom and dad's close friends were going to Pennsylvania for the summer. Mm-hmm. And they just had a man that I had to meet. I'm disfellowshipped, but they wanted me to meet their nephew. He's going to be perfect for her to marry. He's 25, and here I am, like,
what?
16 going on 17. Yeah.
Okay.
But I was still disfellowshipped. So my dad calls his friend, who was one of the elders on my case, and says, "Hey, they have this great opportunity to go to Pennsylvania for the summer. It'll be good for them, and so has a nephew they want Nina to meet." And, I think they were just scared. Like they didn't want me to get pregnant or something to like marry her off and, let her be someone else's
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
But they reinstated me so I could go on this trip. That is the only reason why they reinstated me. He's like, "Oh yeah, have her write a letter." I think it had been 8 months by that time that I
And
had been
how old
disfellowshipped.
were you? 17?
16 going on 17. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had been
Yeah.
disfellowshipped at that point then for well over a year, right?
Oh, maybe over a year then. I don't remember. Timelines.
Man, I just wonder why they would have kept you disfellowshipped for so long.
Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was only like 15 going on 16.
Gotcha. But still, I
But
mean,
yeah.
in the end, they're
Yeah. Well, like I said,
taking
I
you
wrote
back
the
so you
letter
can
2 weeks
see
later.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can go see a
then-
guy who's much older than you, which is weird.
Well, and another reason why I stayed disfellowshipped is because, and this is like what I struggled with telling. I had made up a whole bunch of lies, kind of like storytelling, like my mom,
Mhm.
and I brought other witnesses into it. And I had lied about sleeping with like I didn't, but I just totally made up this whole fantasy life with this guy, and it was so humiliating. And I did this while I was disfellowshipped. I also said I had been raped, and I wasn't, just because I was so alienated. Because I had so many classes with the other Jehovah's Witnesses, and I just wanted attention. So that's the only way I knew how to get it. You learn by watching the people who raise you, and that's And it got me a lot of sympathy, but then people were like really, really concerned about me. So of course they went to the elders, and then I said they were lying. And, so it just became a really big deal that got way blown out of proportion. So I'm sure that's why I was disfellowshipped for quite a while, because I definitely wasn't showing a repentive heart by continuing to lie.
Right.
So.
Right. And is this when you were having to go out in service and stuff because you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
So you were a kid, so you had to still do it.
My parents thought it would look good, to get me back reinstated. And so they asked the elders if I could go out in service. And they said, yeah. They said I could go out in service.
You just couldn't speak to anybody, maybe? Like, did you just go as a partner?
I could go out with my parents or my siblings. No one else. But, like, I could,
You could talk at a door?
If I'm dead in God's eyes, how am I able to bring people into the organization? It's so weird.
That is very strange.
Very, very strange. So we end up going to Pennsylvania. It's a great time. It's a fun summer. Come back, and we decide we're definitely going to move. And my dad told me not to tell anyone. Well, we're at the meeting one night, and I'm passing notes with my girlfriends, and I tell them, hey, my dad catches me passing notes, and he grabs it and puts it in his front pocket. And I was like, oh God, I'm going to be so dead. And I was old. Like, I was way too old to be getting spankings at this time. And after the meeting, I thought I'd be real cute. And I kind of just like reached in his pocket and tried to grab the note, like, he'll think this is funny. He like hit me in front of people in the aisle of the Kingdom Hall. Like, beat me on my bottom. Wow. So humiliating. I'm a teenager. Like, I'm in high school at this point.
Yeah, that's mortifying when you're that age.
And then it gets worse. When I got home, like, he beat the living. I had welts and bruises all up and down my legs and he was so angry at me. And I think it was just because he saw me going down the same path as my mom, and he just felt like, I can't control her now. I can't control her. And I think it just made him, I don't know, but there's no excuse for him hitting like that.
Yeah.
And especially at the age I was. But that was the last spanking I ever got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the last one I ever got. And so we end up, man, there's so much more I need to tell you, but it kind of goes back. When I was young, my dad, one night, he was supposed to be at a swap meet. He had a little small engine repair shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that my dad was not good with money, and he needed parts to rebuild something, and he stole the parts from a swap meet, and the cops brought him home. Like, we were wondering like where my dad was. It was super late at night, and the cops ended up bringing him home, and saying the car's an impound, because I guess he ran from them. And yeah, it was just weird. Another time my dad just disappeared. He disappeared. He was gone for over a day. My uncles went to go look for him. He had crashed his truck into a tree, and they could see blood and stuff, from like the windshield and the steering wheel, but they couldn't find my dad. They finally found him wandering, like all like lethargic and dehydrated and everything on
Drunk?
the side of the road. No, dehydrated.
No, I'm just wondering, was he drunk and
Oh, he
that's why
might
he
have. He
left?
probably was. He
Yeah.
probably was.
That's what
I
people
would
do a
find
lot
out.
of times.
Yeah, I would find out later. Like, he told me this much later. He was trying to kill himself. He had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on himself, and he was trying to kill himself and make it look like an accident. And he told me, he's like, I tried so many times, Nina. He's like, I crashed the truck. He's like, I literally picked a boulder up over my head and dropped it on my head, and it broke in half. And I thought, Jehovah doesn't want me to die. And I'm like, why are you telling me this? I don't need to know this. So my dad had just been caught up again. He tried to burn the small business down for insurance money. And then one time, my mom was out of town, and I was at a slumber party. My dad came and picked me up. I was exhausted. We had been up all night long. My brother and sister were at my grandma's house, and I fell asleep. And I remember when we pulled up my dad's truck, he had built this like box with all these padlocks around it. And I was like, that's weird. And I started asking him questions, and he told me, it's for work. And I was like, okay. So he wakes me up. It's dark outside, and he's like, hey, I'm going to drop you off at your grandma's house because I need to go do something, and your mom's not back yet. It's like, okay. Well, I fell asleep again, and I woke up to my mom frantically asking me what was the last thing my dad told me. Well, when we got home, he had totally cleaned out his closet. He took everything, and he just left us.
Oh, wow.
Just left us. And at this point, my mom was being like disowned by her relatives, but they like kind of pulled together because of this. My dad had ran to Texas to be with his mom. He was planning on divorcing my mom. So yeah, just like weird stuff like that happening throughout my life. It was just very confusing. And
did he divorce her?
He did not. He did not.
It didn't sound like it just from some of the stuff you said in the timeline, but
right. So back forward to like we're moving to Texas, and I was molested a few times as a child by different people. And
I'm not surprised with everything else, unfortunately.
You know how like they say you go either way, you either become like more curious about sex or you become terrified. And no occasion was ever very violent. And I think it just awoken stuff in me at such a young age that I didn't understand it. That was another thing my mom was really weird about, because, I started, masturbating, of course, at such a young age. She would smell me and my sister's hands every morning to make sure that we weren't doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Very weird family.
Yeah.
Took me years later to find out, wait a minute, your hands smell like that. Projecting much? But
oh my.
But anyway, but I was also like, I had the fear of Jehovah, and I didn't want to hurt him, and I didn't want to like have sex before marriage or anything. But my mom was so weird about sex and such a prude about it. Like, I can remember watching Lifetime movies with her, and there'd be a romantic scene, and she'd be like, it's nothing like that. It's like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And I was on a mission to prove my mom wrong. My first time was going to be amazing, and it was going to be with someone who knew what they were doing. And, I started going down that thought pattern. So we're in Texas, and I didn't get a lot of attention from boys growing up. But when we moved to Texas, we were in my dad's small town that he grew up in. All the guys that I was in high school with, my dad played football in high school. I don't know how that happened, but he did, because it was still against the rules. But he played all kinds of sports. But those football players, their dads played football with my dad. So I was instant popular in this little small town, Texas. And I started getting a lot more attention. I got a job, and this older boy, he was like 19, and I was going on 17 at the time. And he just would not take no for an answer. He was worldly. And so finally I was like, fine, go to a party at your house. Well, we end up making out. Then the next time we end up doing the whole 9 yards. And then the next night, I just didn't go home. My parents had no clue that I had a boyfriend. I just didn't show up. My parents thought I was dead in a ditch, literally. And the thing that really sucks for them is all the cops knew me because I worked, at this little fast food restaurant, a small town. The cops thought they were cool hanging out with the young, like being friends with the young kids and stuff. And so when my parents went to the cops, they knew where I was and they did not tell my parents, which I think is pretty crappy. But my dad ended up getting a hold of me. They came to the restaurant to talk to me. And I was like, I'm not coming home unless I can keep on dating him. And my mom was like, absolutely not. And my dad was like, we'll talk about it. So they continued to let me date this guy. And I got silently reproved because no one really knew about it. And he went to the meetings and stuff. And then he moved back in with his parents. And he had like a mother-in-law home on the property.
Oh, yeah.
Like a little apartment. So
Yeah.
he had that. And my dad knew this. And he told me when he dropped me off unsupervised at his parents' house, I was supposed to have dinner with his parents. He's like, no, you don't go to his house alone. And I'm like, oh, no, Dad, that'll never happen. Well, of course it happened. And I messed up again. And I felt really bad. And I went to the elders. And, they asked me, the details they ask is like so repulsive. And asked all the dirty details. And I said, I did tell him no, because I remember I had seen like some after school special about like date rape. And if you say no, and they still do it, that's like rape. So I was like, I told him no, because I did at first. I was like, no, because I was trying to, but I was, regardless. But the Kingdom Hall was really small. And they had me in this back room with like this little partition, but they didn't have like a room with like walls or anything like that for them to meet in. It was like where like the nursing mothers went and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you could hear, they sent me out. Me and my dad went to the front of the stage so as to not really listen, try to listen. But I remember me and my dad sitting there and you could hear everything they were saying. And they're like, yeah, like she said no. It's like if someone was going to give me blood at the hospital, I'm going to yank that out and I'm going to fight and I'm going to, tell them no. And he's like, she said no, and then she did it anyways. That's not rape. And my dad looked over at me and he's like, it doesn't look good.
Oh, no.
So I got disfellowshipped, because of that. So that was my second time disfellowshipped.
And how old were you then?
I think I was soon to be like 18 by this point. So I'm disfellowshipped, and I had a job. I had like quit school because, like I said, I was not a very good student. When I moved to Texas, they were going to make me repeat like the 10th grade. And I was like, I hate school. So I just got out and was planning on getting my GED, but I didn't at first. I worked. Our choices when we turned 18 were we could continue working, and then we would have to pay rent to live at home, and we'd have to buy all of our stuff, or we could auxiliary pioneer and they would totally support us. Well, me and my sister both chose work because, we never had anything. So we were able to, get stuff for ourselves. And anyways, so I remember going to an assembly and I was disfellowshipped. And I can't remember what possessed me to come back early before it started. Maybe I was bored. I don't know. But I came back in and a really sweet elderly couple were sitting next to me. And they're asking me all kinds of questions and talking. And my face is bright red. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm disfellowshipped. And she goes, oh, you're so young. You're just a baby. How could they disfellowship you? She's like, what for? And her husband goes, honey, leave her alone. Like, she let us know.
Yeah.
she feels bad enough. Like, stop. But that was hard. Um, I
Yeah,
wasn't
I
disqualified.
always thought it must be hard for somebody who's disfellowshipped to be around witnesses and then have to
Yeah,
say, and especially like at a convention or something, you're around a lot of strangers to have to
yeah,
say, yeah, I'm disfellowshipped.
yeah,
You can't talk to me.
yeah.
That's an awful, awful thing to do to human beings.
It's very hard. So got reinstated, got back in, and went to another convention, and my sister met her then husband, and I met my then husband. They were cousins. And we hung around with them the whole time. And we ended up moving to the town that they lived in to be in their same congregation and everything. Like I said, my parents were weird. It was like they would do something like that out of left field, but then like other rules were just, it was so weird. But hey, let's move to this kingdom hall so they can get married off, you know?
Eh,
And
less kids at home.
yeah. And my boyfriend was not baptized at the time, but he was 6 months younger than me. And we started fooling around too. And I had a best friend at the time who was a Jehovah's Witness, and I think she knew, but I wouldn't say anything because I was trying to protect her. I didn't want her to have to turn me in
Yeah.
to the elders. But I have a big mouth, so like I would tell other people thinking they wouldn't say anything, and I ended up the same night that a girl told on me, my best friend, who I never told, also was like, I think she's doing stuff. You know, she didn't even have the proof, but she goes and throws me under the bus anyways. So they called me and my dad into the meeting and getting all the details and everything. And the presiding, what is it, the head elder called?
Well, it was the presiding overseer. Now it's the coordinator of body of elders.
Oh gosh, yeah, presiding overseer is what I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah. They just have to make it stupider and stupider.
Yeah, he was odd. It always seemed like he was having some sort of an affair with a girl that was a little bit older than me, but he was married. Uh, he said, "Don't tell your mom." He's like, "Your mom doesn't need to know this," because everyone knew, like, my mom was pretty crazy and she'd probably freak out. He's like, "We're going to silently reprove you." Everyone knew, but they silently reproved me. Again, like the rules, like what you get disfellowshipped on, what you get, it's so weird. So,
Yeah, because I was like, well, you're getting disfellowshipped again, of course.
exactly. No, I got silently reproved, and my then husband, boyfriend, whatever, he was going to be getting baptized, and they told him that he needed to wait till the next assembly to get baptized because,
Yeah.
he had to learn his lesson or
Yep.
whatever. And I didn't tell my mom for years. But right after that presiding overseer said, "We're going to start having a study at my house, so I can just get you back on the right track." Well, he would have me meet at his house at 6:45 in the morning. My dad would drop me off at 6:45 in the morning. His wife went out in service really early in the mornings. 6:45 in the morning. And it was so odd because it would be like in this dark kind of place with just like a desk lamp on, and he would like look right in my eyes. It was very uncomfortable. And he would ask me, like, "Do you ever have doubts? I mean, it's okay to question." And he would show me kind of flaws in the literature and stuff. And I was just like, this is weird. And then this went on for a few weeks. And one day his wife came home to pick up something she had forgotten. And the look on her face when she saw me sitting in there with practically in the dark with her husband, the very next day, he was like, "So, Sister so and so is going to be studying with you now."
Well,
Because it was
what
so
the hell was that?
inappropriate.
Yeah.
It was so inappropriate. My mom was so mad at my dad for even letting that happen. She's like, "That, why does he need to be, you know?" Well, a few years later, and he used to always preach about, like, when he'd give talks and stuff, he always talked about how much he hated going out in service and all this stuff, that, you got to stay faithful and loyal to Jehovah. So a few years later, like, he totally just went off the deep end, started having affairs, totally quit the truth. So I think he was trying to, like, maybe be an apostate to me at that time. I don't know, it was
Maybe
just
he thought that because of how you had been, you were on
right.
your way out.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't care. I don't know what. I'm gonna be honest. I don't. I don't know what anybody in a lot of this story is thinking.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, there's a
Like I still
lot of bad decisions. You were a
so
kid, and I get that, but like
weird.
the adults in all this story are making a lot of bad choices.
Very bad choices. And so everything works out. I end up getting married to this guy, 16 years of my life, 14 married. We got married at 22. We met at 18. So I didn't like him very much. I was embarrassed by him. I thought I looked way too pretty for him, but yet I married this guy because I just wanted to get out of my house and I just wanted to be on my own and have my own rules.
That happens a lot. I think there are a lot of people who got married just to get out of their house.
My sister got married for the same exact reason. My parents would not sign for her to get married before the age of 18. As soon as she turned 18, she married this guy.
Yeah.
And she said as soon as that ring was on her finger, he was like so controlling and everything. Well, as I'm married, probably about 6 to 8 months, my sister starts having doubts about the truth. And her husband, would talk to me and my husband a lot about it. And he's like, I just don't know what to do. She came to me and said she had a lot of questions. And I told her it was between her and Jehovah. And he's like, and I think she's cheating on me. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And so we were having an assembly come up. And my husband stayed back with my sister's husband to catch her in the act because she had already disassociated herself. She went to the elders with all of her questions. They could not answer or give her a reasonable answer to her questions. So she was finally just like, I'm out. She was like, you can't even prove to me that this is real, so I'm done. And she told me later on that she knew at 10 that it was fake. She's like, I got baptized because you got baptized, typical little sister just wanting to do everything.
What were they holding back to catch her doing?
Cheating on him.
Oh, okay.
So she was living in the house, and they're like, we just need to see his car in her driveway, and then we've got it. Well, he didn't have his car in her driveway, but I'm at the assembly. I think we were on lunch break or something. I was in the hotel room, and my husband calls me, and he's like, we caught her. We got it on videotape. She was in bed with this guy, and I was just like, I started crying. I was devastated. I'm like, first of all, my sister leaves the truth, and now this. I was just devastated. I'm like, she's gonna die. She's dead. Like, I'm never gonna know my sister, because I grew up with the concept of if you were disfellowshipped, you're dead in God's eyes. Also, like if you didn't come back during the resurrection or whatever, like you would just be wiped from your loved one's memory, like you never existed. And that was like the scariest feeling or thought for me growing up. Is just like I wouldn't exist like that. Like, how could Jehovah just take my memory away? Like, he created me. Like, I don't get it. But so I was devastated, and I mean, my eyes were all swollen. I could barely control myself. Go back to the convention and found one of the elders, in her kingdom hall that had talked to her. And I was like, I don't know if you heard about my sister. And he starts laughing, and he goes, oh yeah, we got her. He's like, we got her good. She can't get out of this one.
Didn't she disassociate already?
Yes, but they were still trying to, I have no idea what they were doing. I guess trying to get him a divorce. I don't know.
Maybe they were trying to get the, where he can be scripturally free to remarry or whatever.
But it was like, this is my sister's life, and you're joking like another police type work. They encourage my husband and my sister's husband to do this. That is not their job.
Yeah. Oh, well, but that just shows that they care about crime and punishment. They love, some of them love that stuff.
It's so weird. So my sister, we helped her, get moved out and everything, and she ended up just disappearing for 2 years because she said that she felt like she didn't want to put that burden on us, her not believing, and then it being weird, like if my parents tried to talk to her and stuff. So she just went off the grid. And my mom and dad ended up separating during that time. And my mom moved to Colorado. That's where her family was living. And they weren't not talking to her anymore. They were actually being nice.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my husband decided we were going to move to Colorado as well. So I went up with my mom a few weeks before. Well, it was actually ended up turning out longer, but I went back with my mom, and we had been there maybe a year, and my sister contacted my mom, and my mom talked to her.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom talks to me. My mom talks to my brother. She does not shun us.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt really weird. Here I am. I'm not even going to meetings. We lived in Colorado for almost 3 years. I maybe went to 2 or 3 meetings the whole time I was there. I'm leading a total worldly life, pretty much. I'm smoking marijuana. I'm drinking. I'm going to, hanging out with worldly people all the time. Yet I'm judging my sister. I'm judging my sister.
It's easier to do that than it is to look at yourself.
For dating, for celebrating the holidays. And she wants to meet up with me. She's like, I'm going to actually be doing some training for this new job I got. And I'm going to be, in Denver. I thought maybe we could meet up. And I was just like, oh, I'm really busy that day. Like, and my cousin was even like, what are you talking about? You need to go see your sister. Aren't you curious? And I was like, no, she's dead in Jehovah's eyes. Like, why would I bad associate? Like, it's so
you had lived a double life like your entire life, but suddenly you've got this all set.
I'm judging my sister because she doesn't have a freaking card at the New York building. It's just like so sickening looking back on it. Eventually I did end up, seeing my sister. My dad talked to my sister. She flew in. She ended up to the guy she's married to now. She ended up meeting a really nice guy. She was living in Portland. He was in a band, and she wrote on his site, and it was actually him that answered her. She started being this little groupie following him around, and he lived in Seattle, and they ended up together. She lived in Seattle for a while. She'd come down to Texas because we'd moved back to Texas. She'd come to Texas and visit, and it was fine. Like, other witnesses knew we were even talking to her, and no one said anything. It was just really weird. And then my brother, when my mom and dad separated, my brother was 15 or 16, and my dad had felt like he was so hard on me and my sister, and that's why we rebelled, and that's why my sister quit, that he decided to have absolutely zero rules for my brother. So my brother went down a really scary path. All my brother wanted to do was build kingdom halls. So
really?
he loved carpentry. He loved carpentry, and he wanted to be on that committee, right? Where he would just go travel and build assembly halls and kingdom halls. Like, he just loved it.
Yeah, it feels like you have purpose, but you don't have to go knock on doors.
Right, right.
It's more fun service to I guess you would say.
Yeah. Well, he's a general contractor now. It's in his blood. He loves carpentry, and the elders told him that he couldn't do that unless he was baptized. So he gets baptized. He follows, minds all his P's and Q's, even auxiliary pioneers. And they kept on saying he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And he knew all these other brothers that were leading double lives, known double lives, in and out of trouble. And they were on these committees, and they would not let my brother on the committee for some strange reason. So my brother just kind of faded. He started hanging out with my brother-in-law at the time, and they got into really heavy drugs. And my dad would just go, he would know, okay, Matthew said he's going to be here. So he would go park until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when my brother would finally show up at this place, just to make sure my brother was alive. And then he'd go home and sleep. That's how my dad chose to raise him, because my brother would not live with my mom. So he just had a really totally different upbringing than me and my
sounds
sister.
like it.
Yeah. So he ended up just fading. And so then I had 2 out, right?
Right.
He never wrote a letter or anything. So it's like, okay, I can still, me and my brother, I was like his mom, but I was like his fun mom. Everything, even when he was going through all those hard times and everything, he would come to me when it was dark and he needed help. And so we were just very, very close. And so I was just glad that, and at the time, even though I say he was, I was pretty much faded too, but I still professed. I didn't celebrate any holidays. I didn't do really, really bad stuff.
Yeah, you just didn't seem to have the behavioral, or you kind of had the beliefs, but not
Oh,
as
yeah.
far as
I had the
behavior
fear.
went.
I had the fear. I totally had the
Yeah,
fear.
yeah.
Um, so I think I had mentioned to you back in the 90s when that movie Backdraft came out.
Yeah.
That's when I really started having like these questions and doubts, like big time, because I just can remember sitting through that movie and the sacrifices that they made and running into those buildings and almost dying. And I'm like, wait a minute, but they're all Catholic, and that's like the worst of the worst. And most firemen and policemen are Catholic, and I'm thinking they put, like the Bible says, the biggest thing you can do to show love is to sacrifice yourself for your fellow man, and I'm like, but then, so God's going to destroy them at Armageddon? I don't understand. And so that's when those little seeds of doubt just started. And then I started, like, it was harder. I at one point decided to make the truth my own in my 20s, and I was doing everything. I mean, like, I was pioneering. I was not watching any rated R movies. I was not cussing. I was just like straight, path.
Hmm.
And I started getting anxiety because, when they try to like take a scripture out of context, well, sometimes, you hear the same thing. Oh, I mean, I can remember hearing the same stuff since I was 4 years old, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nothing really ever changes unless, of course, it's a prophecy that was supposed to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Um, so, so I'm listening, and they're trying to say this scripture meant one thing. Well, I started reading before that scripture and after that scripture, and I was like, that's not what that's saying at all.
It is funny
So I
how
started
they
doing
they
that
make
a lot.
fun of other groups for not reading context, but they don't
Right,
either.
right. So then I started just like delving into the scriptures, just like really delving in, and I started feeling really bad about it because we're not supposed to really study the Bible without the aid of their material.
Mhm.
And I felt so guilty about it, because I was being a really good Christian at that time. And I remember being out to lunch with my mom and one of her friends, and I said, I need to tell you something, but I think you're not going to like it. And she said, what? And I said, well, I'm really starting to read the Bible just by itself. And a lot of the things that we preach is not what the Bible says. And my mom goes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I was like, but don't I sound like an apostate? And she goes, no, not at all. You're questioning God, likes you to question him, and just, I don't think she realized what path I was going down. I think
Yeah.
she thought, she's just getting some questions answered. She'll pray and it'll be fine, right? Keep on knocking on those doors. You'll be fine. Um, I was at a meeting, and they were talking about, bringing, people in, people who have lost people. And I remember thinking, I don't want to bring anyone into this. Like, I feel horrible all the time. My anxiety started getting so bad that, like, literally, if a light was yellow and I was like 2 feet away from it, I'd panic because I'm like, do I go? Do I stop? Do I go? Do I stop? Like, I'd start hyperventilating, getting like dizzy. Um, I just did not feel like myself. I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and so my mother-in-law at the time was like, maybe you should go talk to a therapist. And I was like, well, we're not allowed to do that. She's like, no, just go talk to him. Maybe you need to be on some medicine or something. If you're having anxiety, that's a chemical thing. It's perfectly okay. I went to the therapist, and they started asking me questions. And a lot of my answers were like, well, that makes me feel guilty. That makes me feel bad. I feel like I need to do all this for other people, but not for myself. And she looked up at me and she goes, are you in a religion? And I said, yes. And she goes, what's your religion? And I said, Jehovah's Witness. And she starts taking all these notes. And it's like, she's like, first of all, you have to take care of yourself mentally and healthy before you're even capable of taking care of anyone else. So, like, just put that out of your mind right now. And she goes, and the things you're feeling guilty about is not normal. She's like, you should not be feeling bad about that. This is a human reaction. This is a human, and I'm just like, I don't know. Well, she ended up giving me Paxil and Xanax. And I started feeling a little bit better. But then, like, the thing about the truth just kept on, like, I was doing everything. We were friends with, really spiritual people. And my husband was doing so good. And I was just like, I don't know. I just can't stop this feeling. So I called my sister. I was at work one night. I worked at a hotel in a little small touristy town. So like when it was off season, it'd be dead. And I worked like the 3 to 11 shift or the overnight shift. So I had all the free time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I called her and I started telling her about the doubts that I was having. And I said, like, when did you know that you didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness? I said, I can't even believe I'm saying this. Like, my heart was pounding. Like, I could hear it in my ears and just like the blood rushing. Like, I was so terrified because I'm thinking Satan, the demons, of course. What else would it be?
Mm.
And my sister goes, it sounds like you need to go on a spiritual journey. I was like, what the heck is a spiritual journey? She's like, well, I don't want to persuade you in any way or like tell you what to do. It just, just think on it and just like really start reflecting on your life and what you think you might want. And I'm like, what is this bogus advice? What is she talking about? So I got off the phone with her.
I can't do this by myself. I need magazines in order to do that.
Right. And so I'm thinking, I got off the phone with her and I was like, you know what? A spiritual journey. I don't really know much about my religion. Maybe I should just find out the history, like how it all began, because I really don't know. And this was like right after the whole new light about how the 144,000, because they said just generation would die and then the end would come.
Yep.
And so they got new light about that. And I remember that was just one more thing. It was like, wait a minute, what? We're still going?
So this was the 90s version of the generation change, not the recent
2000,
one.
Early 2000.
Oh, early
late
2000,
90s, yeah.
But this wasn't the overlapping generations. This was just the...
I don't even know about that.
Generation is just like a period of time.
This was like 2003.
Yeah.
So... I don't know what made me do it, but I typed into because we didn't have any, that was before, companies got smart and started putting filters on the internet and stuff, you could look up anything. And I was just like, Jehovah's Witness history. All this stuff started coming up. And I was like, wait a minute. So what I had read, and I haven't heard this on your podcast yet, so I don't know if anyone's mentioned this, but what I had heard was the original guy, I can't remember his name.
Charles Russell.
Was he the first? He was the guy that invented the religion? Yeah,
Charles Taze Russell, and then Joseph Rutherford took it from him.
Okay, that's right. He was not an atheist. It was another religion.
Talking about Freemason?
He wasn't a Freemason.
No.
It starts with an A. I can't think of it.
Oh, he was an Adventist. Well, he was associated with the Millerites, William Miller, and the Great Disappointment.
Right, I knew that. Yeah. But the first thing I learned was that he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he did not want to believe in hell. So he was crazy. Like he would write scriptures in the streets and he would like shout about the end of the world, but there was no hell, you're not going to go to heaven. Like he just started making this stuff up. Well, he got in cahoots with this other Seventh-day Adventist and they started a newsletter. And I'm just reading all this stuff and I'm like, wait a minute, what? We have roots as a 7-day, like what? Like he just made this up because he didn't want to believe. And I was like, that's gotta be wrong. So I'm reading more and then I find out about the Masons and I see the pyramid. And then I start, reading about like when you couldn't even have a organ transplant. People would die.
That was cannibalism.
Right. And then I started reading about like people, I didn't even know this was a disease, but I guess there's some people that have to get blood put back into their body because their blood's so thin or they don't have enough.
Yeah, there's different blood.
But witnesses that had these issues, like they would just let their kids die.
Oh yeah.
Like because they can't have blood in. And then like rules would change and it was like how many lives were lost because of this rule, but the new life. Like if God knows everything, why didn't he just tell us about the plasma from the beginning? Why didn't he just tell, why didn't he say that this was okay? Then I read about the Beth Sherm and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh my Lanta. So I just I read the Franz book and then I came across an ebook called Captives of a Concept. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I've heard of that.
So
not read it, but
amazing.
I've heard of that one.
Well, at this time I'm going through this. I'm not really telling my mom about it. I'm not really telling my dad about it, but I'm talking to my husband about it. And he's like, you need to be careful. You sound like an apostate. And he's like, I don't know what you're thinking. And I was like, but think about it. I was like, look, when we were this age and this was okay, but now it's not, or it wasn't okay, but now it is. And the conscience matter, like, what does that even mean? If we have free will, we're not allowed to use it, or if it's a conscience matter, if it's okay with us, but it's not okay with God, we're screwed anyways. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And aren't you just tired? Aren't you tired?
Aren't
Like,
you just tired? Yes.
I'm 32 years old and I feel like I'm 60. Like, I'm just wanting it to end. I just want it to be over. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be good enough. And I was going over I read the whole, I devoured that Captives of a Concept, and I got the Jehovah's Witness. I think it's like their big green book. I can't think
Insight
of
on
what
the
it's called.
scriptures.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
that, or the
And so
Proclaimer's book, one or the other.
the Proclaimer's book.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And so I'm going through it and I'm seeing how he's debunking, and showing pictures of, like, there's a picture in, like, the first version. There's a Christmas tree. The elder or
Yes.
and I'm just like, wait a minute. I mean, that's one of the reasons why my grandfather got disfellowshipped, is because he would not quit smoking cigarettes when they decided that was,
Yep.
a bad
They
thing.
smoked cigarettes, celebrated holidays. Charles Russell
They did
sold
everything.
Miracle Wheat. they had all kinds of scams going.
So he got curious and he goes, well, you are using the publication. And I'm like, yeah, which was so funny because he was always like, we were never like, we got strong for maybe like 2 or 3 years of our whole time together. That was like the strongest I'd ever been, that I wasn't
Right.
playing. I was actually doing everything I was supposed, and I was just burning out. So I don't know how people do it for years. I just don't. But he started looking at it and he got, I think, into chapter 3 and he was like, I'm done. And I was like, what? And he's like, I'm done. He's like, I'm going to talk to the elders tonight after the meeting. And if they can't answer my questions and not bring up new light, he's like, I'm done. I was like, okay. So I think this happened a little because I disassociated myself before he did. I had made my decision and I let my mom know, and she cried. And, she didn't try to persuade me or anything. She just, was worried about me. And then I invited my dad up to my job to tell him. And we were sitting across from each other and I told him, I said, things are just different, Dad. I said, for once I have friends in my life that don't judge me, friends that I can actually go to when I'm struggling with something, and they're not going to go to the elders about it or go to you about it. It's not going to be gossiped about. It's not, until I get in trouble. I said, it's like I can trust people. And I said, and I feel so free. And I don't know how to tell you, but, and he's like, don't write a letter. He's like, please don't write a letter. And I was like, I have to. I'm sorry, but I do not want to be any part. I'm telling them to, like, burn all my cards up in New York. I said, I do not want any part of this religion. And he told me, I mean, he went white as a sheet. He started shaking. I mean, you would think I was the devil himself sitting across from him. And he said, well, I hope your new friends are worth it. And he left. I was just like, okay. So it was like shortly after that, my husband had read that and he was like, I'm done. So he went and talked to the elders. And of course they couldn't do anything with saying new light or, new light, So he was like, I'm done. I'm writing my letter too. Well, then his mom, was freaking out. Long story short, I ended up getting his mother, his aunt, 2 of my best friends and their spouses and kids, and a couple of other people that weren't really baptized but were definitely considering it, out of that religion.
Nice. Hey, for
so
once you actually went out in service and helped somebody. Good for you.
Exactly. And I made these really awesome bounded books, like these really thick books with, like, all the information I had gotten off the internet, all the publications, the Captives of a Concept ebook in there. Like, I made these for Christmas, my first Christmas, for, like, my
Awesome.
my friends that had left, so I was like, in case they have any questions, here you go. And they all ended up disassociating themselves or fading. And my mother-in-law was like, but what do we do? Because she's like the type of person that, like, has to be led, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure things out for myself.
Yeah. Who else do we follow?
Strange thing. I need to go back just a tiny bit. As weird as my dad was with the whole thing, he's actually the person that put the final nail in the coffin for me leaving. I was having a nervous breakdown in the middle of the night, and I called him, and I was hysterical because I was like, I think I want to leave. I don't know. I just feel so weird. And he let me get it all out. And he goes, Nina, you know, I look at it this way. Even if it's not true, at least I was a good person. You left us. You were an alcoholic. You you asked my best friend to run away with you while you were still married to our mother. Like, you're a good person? No, thank you. Not worth it to me. So I mean,
Wow,
that
though,
was
that's
the
an interesting point. You see where being in something like that for a lot of people, as long as like they feel like as long as they're hitting, this, they can check this box and this box and this box and this box. As long as they can check some of these boxes, they feel like they're good enough. For
exactly.
some people.
As long as they're legalistic.
Yes. For those who are sincere, they never feel like they're good enough because they don't see it as checking boxes. They see it as trying to be this whole person that you're supposed to be. But for those other people, they're getting something from it. They feel like they're okay, even though like it's their justification.
Yes.
They're doing all these bad things, but they're at all the meetings. And they studied for the meeting and they did the daily text. And so they're good, even though they're really crappy people.
Right. Yeah. And so I was just like, no, thank you. And
interesting.
And so I ended up, disassociating myself. I was agnostic for a while. I was like, I believe in, once you get out of such a legalistic cult, you just don't want anything to do with God or religion or anything. You're just so done. And I started feeling like, though, I'm going to die one day. What's going to happen? And that started really freaking me out. And my husband was friends with some guys that were Christian. And we were talking about it one day. And, and I was just like, I don't know. I don't know what I believe. I'm terrified of that. Like, what happens when I die? And it just kept on building and it kept on building. And one night, I could not stay in bed. I was so antsy and I kept on getting up into the living room. And finally I got down on my hands and knees and I was like, okay, if you're God and you really exist, you're supposed to know me better than I know myself. So prove it to me. And if you can prove it to me, not using people, not using religion, if you can prove it to me by you, supernaturally, then I'll believe in you. And he did. And it was a very long night. It was a very confusing night. But I truly felt like there was a battle for my soul that night. Things happened that I cannot explain. And I feel like I became a Christian that night. Someone had given me a New International Version of the Bible like a few years before that, and I never opened it, because it was not a Jehovah's Witness Bible. Oh, yeah. But I remember,
even though they use it sometimes in their when it benefits them.
Exactly. When they can bring up that Psalms 83:18 in their Bible, where it says Jehovah.
Yep. When it corroborates what they want it to say, then they'll use it.
Exactly. I laid in my bed for 3 days with that Bible next to me, just curled up, just numb. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And then on that fourth day, I opened the Bible to that scripture where it says, ask, knock, ask, and you shall receive. And it was like literally the scales fell from my eyes and the Bible made sense to me. And it was like God directly talking to me. It was like, so I just felt this calm and this peace. And then it was like, after that, people just started coming to my life. I started going to a church and I got baptized in a creek and it was all great. And then my first time just realizing that like religion is just not for me. There had been a couple in that congregation or whatever church that had been living in sin with children out of wedlock for years and years and years, and that pastor married them. But then the churches were starting to open their doors to like gays and lesbians. And they had this whole sermon about how they would never be that kind of church and it's disgusting and everything. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. These people sinned for years and years and years, had children out of wedlock. You marry them in front of God and everybody else, and you're going to turn your back on them because you think that's like the Bible says no sin is greater than the other. Like sin is sin, doesn't matter. There's no like point system on that. And I remember thinking that's just so weird. So anyways, like I said, now I just kind of have my own little thing with God and I'm good. Ended up finally getting divorced from my now ex-husband. I knew that he was kind of having this thing for this girl who we're 30, almost 36 at this time, me and him. This girl was 18 years old. And I could just tell, like, the way he looked at her, he hadn't looked at me like that in a very long time. Like, anytime she asked for anything, he was the one that was going to go get it. And I was just like, oh no, we're just friends. We're just friends. So, I had been going to a different church at this time, and I was feeling like my marriage was ending, but I still felt like God hates a divorce, like that was still like ingrained in my head, and we need to work this out. We'd been through so much together, and he came home on his break from work, and I asked him if he would go to counseling with me, and he's like, sure, but if I don't feel anything for you, I don't feel it. It was so cold. Mm-hmm. And I was like, just say it. And he's like, what? And I said, just say you want a divorce. And he's like, but I love you. And I was like, love is an action, and I have not felt love from you in a very long time. So he was like, yeah, I want a divorce. Long story short, I ended up moving to Oregon because that's where my brother and sister live at now. And moved in with my sister, got a fresh start, ended up meeting the man I'm supposed to be with. He had two little beautiful girls who were 1 and 3 at the time, and I've raised them since that age, and we got married in 2012, and just so much better. Life is just not having that guilt anymore. It's just so yeah. It still comes back every once in a while. Even my husband would be like, that's normal. What you're thinking is normal. People think that. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't just shake the perfectionism in ways that we're wired.
We're just being so hard on yourself all the time.
Yeah, negative self-talk and things like that. That's common. It's something we all have to work on and work through so that we don't live lives as prisoners of that anymore.
Right. So, years go by, we're happy and everything. And, like I said, we have family dinner all the time. My mom's always involved. She knows we celebrate the holidays. She doesn't judge. Her friends at the Kingdom Hall know she talks to us. It's really weird. I don't know why she's not in trouble because, they just had a really big thing a few years ago about reinforcing the whole shunning thing. So my dad is the type of man who he's not going to reach out to his kids. He's a man of very few words. I remember asking him one time if he was proud of me. And he goes, yes. And he was remarried at this time, and his new wife had like drug addicts for kids and thieves and everything. And he said, yes, I'm proud of you. And I said, why? And he said, well, you're nothing like Judy's kids. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? You know these people for 2 minutes. Like, he got married literally because he couldn't keep it in his pants. And he would have rather been disfellowshipped for getting married before having sex than having sex before he got married. It was so weird. But anyway, so my dad has come to visit twice. This last time was because of my mom running her mouth. I started getting memories about my dad that were not good. I started having trouble making love to my husband because these visions just kept on coming into my head. Like, I thought my dad had done something to me when I was young. And one night my mom was visiting, and we were up real late at night. And I don't know what possessed me to say anything to my mother, because you can't trust my mom, and she would love to get my dad in trouble. I told her. And A few days later, she called me and she said, "Hey, Nina, do you remember when you told me about your dad?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't want to talk about that with you. It's not healthy. Like, I'm getting, I'm going to a therapist and everything." And she's like, "Well, I remember I told you that I was going to have to tell the brothers." I went numb and tingly, and I like put the phone down to my side and I was like, "No, no, 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 no." So I put the phone back up to my ear and she's still talking. So I put it back down, put it back up. She's still, and I'm so angry. And finally I was just like, "Mother, you did not go to the elders." I was like, "If you went to the elders, we will never speak again. How could you do something like?" "Oh, no, no, no. I was just telling you that I was thinking about going to the elders, but if you don't want me to." And I was like, "Mom, I said, "I'm in therapy. I'm in a healthy place." My therapist basically broke it down like this: because of the relationship that I had with my father, and when him and my mom separated and I moved back to Texas, my dad treated me like a spouse. There was nothing ever but thing like my therapist told me it was very normal.
Yeah.
The visions that I was having, everything. She said it happens, like something will just meld in, and she goes, something may have happened where maybe he did see you naked or something, but and like your brain has processed it more deeper because of the relationship you had with your father.
Yeah.
Okay,
Again,
great.
covert
So this is
incest.
good.
That's the
Right,
term.
right. So this is good. Me and my husband work, we're working through it and everything. So weeks go by. We're getting ready to celebrate my nephew's 13th birthday. This was 2 years ago. And we were going out and we were going to go to this campsite and it was going to be an all day thing. And we were so excited. And me and my husband were getting gas. And my sister calls me and she goes, "Nina, I just got a really weird call from Judy," which is our stepmom. And I said, "What?" And she goes, "She said that the elders called Dad into a meeting yesterday and said that you went into Mom's Kingdom Hall and said that Dad molested you." And I was like, "I will call you right back." And I called my mom and I was like, "I will never talk to you again. Consider yourself like I'm
Yeah, you've been
disowning you, just like
disfellowshipped.
your sisters
Yeah.
have done to you. Like, I understand it now. You bring all of this pain and hurt onto yourself. You are a sick person." And I hung up. Well, she kept on trying to call me back, kept on trying to call me back. So I call Amanda back and I was like, "Listen, this is what happened." And she goes, "Are you serious?" And she goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine. I'm working through things." I said, "Come to find out, he's never done anything, like everything's fine." And I said, "I don't know." She goes, "Why would you tell Mom that? You knew Mom would do something like this." And I was like, "I don't know." I said, "You know how sometimes you just wish you had a normal mom that you could just talk to? Well, I had one of those moments, I guess." And she was like, "Okay." She's like, "Well, we'll tell Matthew when you get here," which is my brother. So I tell my brother, and my brother's like, "Oh my gosh." And he's like, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, first of all, they knew my name as Nina Blotter. None of my dad's elders or anyone. Plus, her elders told my dad's elders that I went into the Kingdom Hall." I was like, I'm going to sue them for defamation. I never went into their Kingdom Hall. And how do they have my last name?" So I end up calling my mom's congregation, and two elders end up calling me back, of course, and I'm recording it because I was like, "First of all, how do you know my name?" "Well, your mom came to us, and they just talk in such circles because you could tell they were very nervous because I was just like, "No, what was said?" "Well, she said that you would come to her, and of course, she needed to get that off her chest, and so we wrote a letter to Bethel, and then it's out of our hands. We don't know what Bethel does with it." And I was like, "What?" I was like, I said, "You, in the letter, you stated that I came into your kingdom." "No, no, no, no. We just wrote we took record of what your mom said and sent it to Bethel. We don't know. It's out of our hands after that. We don't know what they tell the other congregation." So I talked to my stepmom and I talked to my dad, and I was like, "I'm going to call your elders and tell them that I never said that. I'm so sorry that this happened." And I had to talk to an elder that knew me since I was like in my teens, and he didn't even remember me. And And he's like, "Oh, yes." And I said, "First of all, I never even went to a Kingdom Hall. Haven't stepped foot in a Kingdom Hall in years." I said, "Second of all, why would I go to you about something this personal?" And anyways, it all just ended up getting swept under the rug because, of course, my mom's story was like she was looking so devastated at a meeting one day, and the elders asked if she needed to unburden herself with something. And she made it seem like they totally made up everything and took it out of context. And it's like we tried to hold her accountable, but with my mom, we've confronted her over the years so many times about her made up stories and lies. And she's going to be 70. Like, you just can't fix that type of pattern and
Yeah,
thinking.
it's interesting listening to this because there's a quote I really like, and that is that when somebody shows you or tells you who they are, believe them. And for a lot of us, when we leave, or just engaged in toxic family dynamics to begin with, I think a lot of us have a vision in our head of who we wish our mom or our dad was.
Right.
And so we cling a lot of times to the desperation of a vision and not the reality of who our parents are. And so sometimes, you can see, and I love what you said, I don't know. Sometimes I wish I had a mom that blah blah blah, that listened, or that you could confide in, that you could go to, right?
Yeah.
And so we want that, and so I think a lot of times we allow ourselves to see that in our parents when it's not really there. So you have a lot of people who end up repeating very toxic, dysfunctional patterns because they want so badly to have their parent be that healthy person that they're not. And so they keep getting the blowback of going back to a dry well, trying to get water from it and getting hurt. And
Right.
it's just, it's sad because clearly your mom doesn't have it. Whatever the program is that she needs or the tools she needs, she doesn't have it. She is who she is
No.
at this point, most likely, very unlikely to change. So then the onus becomes, is just on you to accept that
Yeah.
this is who she is.
Right.
And it sucks because it hurts. It ends up hurting so many people unnecessarily.
It really does. I mean, she's so bad. She's gotten so bad over the years that, like, I will tell her a story one day, and the next day she'll call me and tell me the same story as if it happened to her. It's like she can't even keep it straight anymore.
She has an illness.
But she really does. And she never got help for it. My dad never tried to get her help when she would be locked in her bedroom for days with the, blacked out windows and stuff. And, it's just she's not on the pain pills anymore. She stopped that a long time ago, which I'm glad. But it's just
And
so frustrating.
addicts are known liars.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if she's addicted to pills, that's probably going to come with it. I'm sure she
Right.
has to lie to herself a lot to
Oh yeah.
to
I mean,
make herself feel good.
she got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes a few years ago, and don't you know she cured herself? She doesn't have it anymore.
All right. All right. Well, I
It's like,
mean, if she lived a
you're
very healthy lifestyle, you could get rid of it if you
my
lost
mom
weight.
has been overweight
Yeah,
my whole life,
yeah,
and it's never changed.
yeah,
So
yeah. So it's not likely, that
no.
happened.
But anyways, I just so that was like the last that I had. And I was intending, because I told them I wanted that letter that they sent, and they were like, once it's out of our hands, it's out of our,
Oh
like, they
yeah.
made it seem like, and I was ready to go down to that Kingdom Hall and cause a big stink, and I was ready to sue them. And my my now brother-in-law was like, I think religion, like, they're allowed to do messed up stuff like that under their religious beliefs. Like, I don't think you would have a case. It's like freedom of speech or freedom of religion. And I was just like, are you serious? I'm not even in it anymore, and they've got files on me yet again.
Yeah, actually, well, and there are privacy acts and such, and you can go through things to get files, but I mean, then you're trusting that they actually gave you what was yours. And
Right.
they're
I
going to
would just
do what
love
they're
to
going to do.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my dad came out to visit shortly after that, and he came out. Well, my stepmom told me he was coming out to repair our relationship and stuff. He never talked about it, and I haven't heard from him since, and that was 2 years ago. So, it's like
Yeah,
It is what it is.
yeah.
I'm tired of being hurt. Like, that's one toxic relationship. My mom's still in my life. My mom's my mom. She's as weird as she is and as disappointing as she is as a parent. Like you said, she's broken. There's an excuse for her. And I mean, my mom would die for each and every one of us. Easy. My mom fights for her kids. So, there's some loyalty to that. Even though she's crazy. I don't have 3-hour conversations with her every week on the phone anymore. I limit it to like 10 minutes. And
Yeah, it's called
just
boundaries, and
kind of,
that's what you
yeah,
have to
exactly.
have with people
When
like
I
that.
had never set up boundaries. My brother and sister set up boundaries so early. And me, I had a lot of empathy as a child. Like, I could see when my sister or my brother would hurt my mom's feelings. So I would overcompensate for that by being her little, like, in the
Well,
summertime, I would be up with her in the middle of the night. We'd be watching movies, we'd be talking. And, it was
a lot of
just very
empathy, a
toxic.
lot of what people call empathy in that situation is actually probably codependence.
Really?
In a situation where you're in a dynamic, especially when covert incest is involved and you've been made the surrogate spouse, a child is turned into a codependent person with that parent. And
That makes sense.
so I would highly encourage. There's actually a really good book called "Codependent No More" by something Melody or Melody
Okay.
Beatty, something like that. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but anyway, it's a really good book on codependence, and I think that honestly, if you look at cult dynamics, are narcissists leading codependence for the most part,
Yeah.
and you see it a lot in families that exist in cults. As you see narcissists at the top, and they often make, sometimes the husband's the narcissist and the wife is the codependent. Sometimes both the husband and wife are narcissists and the kids end up the codependents. And it sounds like you've kind of got one of those situations where it would have been easy to become codependent with a parent who has so many issues, and is because codependence at its core is obsession with the feelings of another, putting their
Oh,
feelings above your own. And
okay.
we were literally taught that. I mean, we were taught that even just from the platform, to be more concerned about, stumbling others or the needs of other people over our own. And what a lot of people see and think as healthy empathy is actually unhealthy codependence. Not all
Right.
the time, and everyone, it's not like you take a blood test and they're like, oh yes, you're conclusively codependent or empathetic. But it's a line you have to walk. And I definitely, if you or anyone listening, myself included, I read the book for a reason. There was a lot of that in my family as well. And yeah, I highly recommend looking into
Codependent no
codependence.
more. I will
Yeah.
go to the library this afternoon and get it. but,
Yeah, it's a
but
good book. And then there's a great book called The Narcissistic Family, that was actually written by therapists for other therapists, about a certain type of family dynamic, that narcissism is a part of. And that book really was good too.
well, I can remember being such a people pleaser
Yeah,
that
me too.
in my early adulthood, I did become very narcissistic and very, like, my thoughts towards people were so hateful, but I had that big smile on my face and I agreed to whatever they said, even though I didn't want to do it because I just couldn't speak up for myself for
Yeah.
some reason.
Can't say no because we were in a cult.
Yeah,
You can't say no in a cult.
right, right. And so, my new husband, like, he balances me out so much. And like, I only knew one way to discipline. It was like 0 to angry.
Yep.
And so I remember the first time my youngest, she was probably 4 or 5, and she did something. It wasn't even that big, but my nerves were already like to the last end. And I turned around and I looked at her and I just like yelled. And she was up on the stairs and she goes, "Stop, you look like a monster. You're scaring me." And I felt so bad because I can remember thinking the exact same thing about my dad. Like,
Yep. We
"You're
repeat
scary."
patterns.
And so,
Yep.
yeah, so my husband helped me, get through that. And the difference between my girls and the way we were raised, like we couldn't say but. We couldn't say stupid. Like there was rules for everything because my parents wanted us to, well, my mom mainly wanted us to have this appearance of this perfect nuclear family.
Hmm.
And, we dressed a certain way. We had to act a certain way. And, like by the time I got into my teenage years, that's when it all just like exploded and I became this whole different person. But my girls, like they, they're allowed to do things, but they just don't do them. And they're not rebellious. We'll check in on their phones and stuff, just to make sure, as a good parent does. And like I think back in fourth grade, my oldest was like saying the S word. It was like that was the worst thing she was doing. I mean, they're both so healthy in their balance. Like they're not followers. They don't get talked into doing stupid stuff. Like the things that my oldest has stood up for, because like, no, I don't want to watch that, or I don't want to do that, and she'll lose friends over it, but she doesn't care because that's her standards, that's her line, and she's not going to cross it. And I was ready to cross any line that was put in front of me. It's like gobble, gobble, gobble. And their
Well, a lot of
mindset
times,
is just so different because they've had the freedom to just be human
yeah, it's the old,
and to grow.
the old illustration that they used. I've talked about it before, but they used to use it in the talks, and it was like, kids are like a spring, and you compress this spring, and then if you let go too quickly, the spring just goes crazy and bounces all, the energy just explodes out of it. And that was used to show that you give your kids responsibilities very slowly, blah blah blah, instead of just letting them do whatever they want. And my question has always been, why do you have to crush the spring?
Exactly.
Who told you had to crush that spring in the first place? Maybe don't crush it.
It was one of my dad's favorite analogies, the
Yeah.
spring.
Yep. Hate that one.
One thing I forgot to tell you that I think, is funny.
Mhm.
My dad's favorite story, my dad loves to tell humiliating stories about his children, but one
Oh, I
of his
bet.
favorite with me, he'll tell anyone who will listen, is that we were at a book study. I don't even remember this, thank goodness. I was a toddler and, I wasn't paying attention, maybe playing with my hair or something. He would take me out into the front yard of these people's homes in a neighborhood, pull a switch off the tree, and beat the living daylights out of me. And he said one day the brother of the house came to him and said, could you start beating her in the backyard because the neighbors are starting to complain? One of his favorite stories to tell.
That's a story he tells willingly?
Yes.
Wow.
He laughs, and he just thinks it's so great.
That's not
so
funny at all.
Like, no.
That's cringy. That's
Yeah.
horrifying.
Yeah. And another thing that was funny is they ended up adopting their grandson, my dad and my stepmom.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who were, considering it had to call each and every one of me and my sister and my brother
Mm-hmm.
and ask us questions. And all three of us, it was so funny, had said, well, he used to spank us, but I don't think he believes in that anymore. We've never seen him, be angry towards this little boy or anything. But he had actually apologized to us into our adulthood about the spanking. He said, they preached it all the time. They taught, well, not preached it, it was on the platform all the time about spanking your kids. And he goes, I now realize like that was not a good thing. So, at least he's matured in that aspect.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Anyone who's still telling that story, I have to question.
True.
But yeah, I certainly hope so. Well, so let me ask you, what, now, first of all, how long have you been out officially?
I got out when I was 30, almost 33, and I am going to be 46 in January.
So 13 years?
Yep.
And so in the 13 years that you've been out, what do you enjoy about your new life?
Oh, I love celebrating the holidays. I really, really enjoy that. My first birthday, it was like my next birthday will be my 11th birthday,
Yeah.
Not 46, I'll be 11. But just being free, not having that constant, like, I felt like I had a voice in my head that was just constantly telling me that I was so evil and impure and bad. And that doesn't happen anymore. just being able to be who I am. I've always been a jokester. I've always been pretty much like a 14-year-old boy as far as like jokes and stuff like that. And like I can just be who I am and people like me for who I am. It's not a show. It's not who I want them to think I am. I'm just me. And my relationships are so much healthier because of that.
Yep.
You can actually go confide in a friend and say, hey, I did this the other night and I'm not too pleased with myself, and instead of them judging, they're like, oh, you know what, let's get through this, like just being able to trust people and your own spouse, being able to trust your own spouse. I mean, I remember one time sitting with a group of sisters. We were out on a girls' night and we were all young. We were in our 20s. And I remember that the oral sex came up in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we all just were like, why can't it just be black and white? Because you'd hear talk about where you're not supposed to do that, but then you'd hear talk where it was a conscience matter. Then you would hear talk, it was always so back and forth. And it's like, I just wish that they would tell us like what we can and cannot do. It's like, I had a friend who, I don't even know how the elders knew about this, but they told her she couldn't dress up for her husband when it came to stuff like that. Like, why would you want to look like a prostitute? Like, just the policing of every aspect of your life. And, I went to college when I moved to Oregon. I finally ended up getting my GED. I moved here on the bubble. I moved here in 2008 when everything started exploding. I could not get a job to save my life. I decided to get my GED and I went through a community college to do it. And since I got my GED through them, I got a first term paid for. And I ended up just enrolling in college. And I went from a D student to I was on the president's or the dean's list every single semester. Like
Nice.
I made straight A's. Just I loved it. I took a religious studies class. It was very eye-opening, to realize that like all these, religions basically have the same story almost. It's just so weird. We even talked about Jehovah's Witnesses in it in that class. So yeah.
So
just the freedom to be human.
yeah, and just to be yourself as a human, as you said. Well, what dreams do you have? Is from this point forward, is there anything that you're looking forward to in particular, or just continuing to be happy?
Just continuing to be happy. My oldest is a sophomore. My youngest is an eighth grader. I just want to continue to see them grow and become these beautiful young women that they're becoming, and helping them through their mistakes and bad choices or whatever. Just seeing them. I mean, they're such great students. I mean, it just comes so easy for them, and we never beat them. And we get compliments on their behavior all the time when they were little. Like me and my brother and sister got compliments. I mean, so just to be a good parent, to be a good role model, and to just love my husband. I mean, everything that was lacking in my first marriage has been like tenfold in my new marriage, to quote Job.
Well, nice. We'll let Job end your episode. Oh, that's awesome. I'm super glad that you have found more stability and happiness.
Yes.
Because it sounds like you came from a lot of chaos and unhappiness.
Yes.
And yeah, I think when we get older and we're able to right some of those situations, it makes it feel even better to have those things, because you have the appreciation of where you came from and how far you've come, as long as you're willing to really look at not just where you still have to go or how far you still have to go as a person, but just looking at the growth from where you came to where you are. It sounds like you've really grown a lot as a person, and that's what life's about. That's an awesome thing. So I'm glad that you were able to share all this with us.
Well, thank you for taking the time to let me tell my story.
I want to thank everybody, all these 10 episodes that I'm releasing pretty much at once. I want to, thank everybody who was brave enough to tell their stories. It takes courage to speak out and I know it's very cathartic for people to listen back to later. So I wish the best for everybody. If you want to support the podcast and the work that goes into it, or the new website, xjwhelp.com, you can support them both at patreon.com/shunned. Patreon is Patreon. So that's patreon.com/shunned. This work matters. It matters to the people that are listening. That would be you. It matters to the people who are watching videos that are helping to find or finding the help that they need. It matters to the people that get to participate and hear their stories being told in their own voice, or that sometimes reconnect with other people from their past through their episodes, or even, you reach out to these people and leave a comment of encouragement to them. And that matters. It matters to people that are listening that are from other cults, and they get to see that they aren't alone because there's so many similarities. So if this matters to you, please support it so we can help more people. You can also support by leaving a 5-star review for both Shunned and This JW Life, my initial podcast. These reviews help others to find these stories so that we can help them heal. And if you hear an episode that you like, share it on social media. Tell others on the XJW Reddit or some group about it. Wherever you are, if there's something that impacts you, one of the highest compliments you can ever pay is to pay it forward and to tell other people about the episode or the podcast in general, or the coaching or the Shunned Recovery Project, or whatever it is that's helping you. Please help share it to other people, because there are a lot of people that don't know these things exist. If you like, that goes for the new site as well. If you like the new site, xjwhelp.com, please share it to others. Keeping it to yourself isn't going to help anybody. So let's make 2020 the start of something big as a community. Support good work. Participate if you can. Help others, and let's take our power back. If you want individual help, then reach out to me through xjwhelp.com or shunnedpodcast.com. Leave a message of support for the people telling their stories. Get resources mentioned on the website, along with links to support the show, or contact me if there's something that you need to discuss. Join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group, which is a support group. So get involved. If we want something different, then we're going to have to do something different. Let's be the start. The song for the show today, as always, is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And as I end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
Curse God